Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you? I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, we decided to jump on a fireside chat. I'm following you for quite a while already on LinkedIn, so I'm just following your path quite
Thank you.
closely. And yeah, I wanted to jump on a fireside chat today with you to speak about entrepreneurship and more specifically female entrepreneurship. But before we dive into that topic that is so dear to our heart, please go ahead and shortly present yourself and what you're doing, your company.
Sure. Thank you so much, Katharina, for having me. It's a pleasure. And of course, I follow you on LinkedIn too. I was like, yes, she's a boss. I like that. Um, so, for those who don't know me, my name is Fadé Ogunro. I am the CEO and founder of bookingsafrica.com. Bookingsafrica.com are pioneers of digital work. We are a marketplace where you can source talent on demand. You can view, book, search, compare prices transparently. And not only are you able to book talent to physically come to you, we also offer virtual services, which means that the job can be procured and delivered end to end online using our video call service as well. So especially during Corona, we quickly pivoted and realized that this is going to be the future of work. And we know that we want to be on the forefront and pioneers of digital work. So we went beyond offering physical bookings. We also started virtual bookings as well. We operate in Nigeria, South Africa, and Kenya. We've got over 15,000 service providers on our platform that are verified, and they range from actors to accountants, models to makeup artists, videographers to hairstylists, legal advisors to therapists. And I just love the fact that we can connect the entire continent and the gig workers at the tap of a button. So we've got over 100,000 downloads. We're trying to expand to about, I'm quite ambitious. So I always like to say 20 African countries, but let's see how that goes. At least another 3 by the end of 2022. And about 65% of the gig workers on our platform were actually women. So we're able to actually track their earnings, and we can see that by giving them access to a larger marketplace, we can actually impact their earning capacity as well. So that's what we've been doing since we launched in November 2019, and we do have other plans to further deepen the reach that we have, because we've realized that there's a massive gap between the people who have access to smartphones and can utilize our apps and utilize and download our app and utilize our website. What about those workers, the informal workers who don't even have access to smartphones, but who are also gig workers? So we're now also looking at ways and doing quite a bit of research to see what the best ways to transform those in the informal economy without these access to connectivity and smart devices, as well as access to finance, how we can move them along to participate in the digital economy, of course, where digital work lies and where Bookings Africa lies. That's where we are. We do believe that Africa does work. We've got a large workforce, and that's what we say, that we believe Africa works.
So despite the fact that it's an absolute brilliant idea, I love the enthusiasm. So on the other hand, for those who don't know me, my name is Katharina Dalka. I'm the CEO and founder of StellarOne. We do strategy and investment advisory in tech. So we are advising corporates, investors in everything related to tech investments, and then could go from really the beginning of the process, meaning the strategy advisory. I'm at a point A, I want to go to point B. What's the right point and how do I get there in a nutshell? To anything related to investment processes, and that can be mergers and acquisitions, due diligence, valuation, but also what we call post-investment enhancement, meaning that an investor has already put money into an investment and wants to take the investment a little bit farther. We have a specific offering for the African continent, which is catering to financial institutions and public institutions, because we realized that banks and public institutions want to work with fintech and tech in general. However, there's a huge gap between the business model on the one hand side of fintech that have like a very short cash cycle, very imminent needs of cash and expanding. And on the other hand, banks and public institutions that have a very long decision cycle, that don't really have big issues when it comes to cash management. And also, we realize that often banks and public institutions are a little bit hesitant to work with tech companies that are startups because of, you know, the security of the investment or the security of the partnership. So we help bridging that gap by monitoring the relationship, you know, bridging the questions, helping the management to navigate on both sides, to navigate this area. Yeah, and so we are active in Europe at the moment, a little bit all over the place, and we are also active in Africa. Personally, I'm also part of the board of Africa FinTech Forum, which is always a great pleasure. Shout out to Alex, the CEO. Yeah, so this is for us. Great. So yeah, we wanted to talk today about female entrepreneurship. So we've been doing the preparation of this meeting. We've already talked about it. And, so my take on it is actually, so for me as a female entrepreneur, I'm 2 years down the line right now. I'm running 2 businesses in parallel. The other one is I'm a co-founder of FinTech, where I'm also a chairwoman. And I think that there's something that is valid for everybody, which is the hardship and the anxiety that comes with it. And if I say hardship, I'm thinking about like the psychological pressure that you get, but also the financial hardship, because it's a huge investment. You need to have a little bit of savings before launching your whole thing. What is more specifically hard for me as a woman is probably that I'm navigating in a purely male environment between tech and finance. So tech and corporate finance are very, very male dominated areas. And usually when I sit in a meeting, I am the only woman, and most of the time I am also the youngest. So in terms of diversity, it's not quite that. And I also can feel, even though it's not clearly expressed because it's not PC anymore, I can clearly feel that the trust level towards me is not the same as if I was a man. In projects, and I also realize that when I pitch in proposals that I need to be better and work harder all the time. So it's a bit like an underlying issue, but it's very, I can sense it, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely.
So it's always like it requires me to be always double as good as everybody else to get to where I want to be.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. The average expectation of a woman is to be twice as good to get half of what a man gets. I'll give you a simple example. I mean, I've heard this frequently, and I never thought that I would actually be in that position to firsthand experience it. And it was actually funny. I experienced it more when I started employing staff. So the less skilled the guy was, or a male candidate was, the more money he'd wanted to demand. And the more skilled a woman was, she was actually demanding half of what he would want. And I was like, you're actually way more skilled, way more educated. Why are you valuing yourself so low? And she says, because the moment that she doubles her value, she literally gets laughed out of the room. So she always was almost taught that she's overvaluing herself. Whilst if the guy offers the same amount, that asks for the same amount that the woman asked for, apparently the male employers would say, no, you're actually worth more than that. So they walk around with this entitlement that I don't have to do as much to be worth more, quote unquote. And that is definitely a stereotype that I want to break. I really want women to empower women and to own the value, the intellectual property. We all went to the same school. I mean, so why do we have the same degree and then you're earning more than me, especially if I've performed better than you consistently? And apart from that, just there's so much data that just shows that if you have diversity within a workforce,
absolutely, yeah.
You know, you're more likely to gain more revenue. You're more likely to just get a better retainership. You're more likely to it's just a thriving environment. Even if you look at, let's say, the laws that were put in place in Norway, I believe, where there have to be a certain amount of female board members in any company that's registered. There has to be a certain amount of women in parliament. So they actually found that the society thrives more and the economy grows faster. So if we've got all this data, I'm just like, why can't we can birth the men, but yet we can raise them until it's time for them to go to work, and then all of a sudden we must be subservient. 95% of like the world's wealth is controlled by men. I'm like, that number just is, we're already sitting, we're sitting at a disadvantage. So it's on us really to do what we can to empower the next woman. And it's not just women that have to do that. Men have to be very intentional. And that's why I like the fact of, for example, I've got a venture capitalist, a VC that backed me, that backs Bookings Africa. And it's such an inclusive environment. Majority, at least, I'm sure 50% of the staff are women. And it's all positions, from board members to all C-levels to seniors to interns. It's a very, very diverse, and that was an environment that I was glad to be a part of as well, because it's part of my values, my core values, and they definitely see that. And the chairman is actually a proud feminist. So yeah, I was like, okay, this is definitely the sort of the like-minded environment that I definitely want to be a part of. So you have to be very intentional about the sort of crowd that you keep amongst yourself, even professionally.
Yeah, it's interesting because, every time I have this conversation, it's not the first time, right? I'm like, this is 2021. How is it even possible that we even have that conversation? And then I'm thinking about what I'm experiencing on a daily basis. And I'm like, we're not done with that subject yet, Mm-hmm. Like, as you say, thankfully, like there are men around me who actually support me and take me as their equal and, value my capacity. Shout out to my two co-founders at Didon who pushed me to be chairwoman, which is a great thing. I'm like, they're great guys. But I mean, I also
need that.
I always experienced the contrary in the larger part of my professional environment. I'm just like, how is this even possible that we still have that conversation? It's such a no-brainer, but hey, anyway, we're not there yet. And indeed, which brings me a little bit to the next point that we wanted to discuss, right? Because you're very active in mentorship, and I also, I think that also you and me, we start to be in a position where we are, I don't want to say privileged, because we still have to work very hard and we have still quite a lot to do in our lives. Yeah. But we start to be okay in terms of, the position where we at, and that we can, help younger women or our younger selves to, make the move. And you said something.
Navigate.
Yeah, navigate. And you said something very, very, very important, which is the importance of critical thinking. And I found this notion so valuable. So please tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay, so just a bit of context. Katharina and I had a catch-up convo before this, and we were just talking about our experiences, getting to know each other a little bit, and I just mentioned that for me, and I don't want to use the word privileged, but I did come from, I've lived in the UK pretty much, I wouldn't even say my whole life, because I've been in Nigeria for a decade now, but literally primary school, secondary school, A-levels, university, I worked there. My mom's half English. So, I've been in the UK my whole life. And then I came here even after working in the UK, because I was working for Google, and I moved to Nigeria. And I just realized that in all facets, there is a lack of critical thinking, and not just from education. I noticed, and the longer I stayed here, I noticed there was more of a trend literally from tradition and culture, dare I say, where you've got to be so respectful that using your initiative, being curious, asking questions is almost seen as disrespectful. So don't speak when adults are speaking. Don't ask questions. Do as I say, not as I do. And that formula has gone from a parenting style, a traditional parenting style, into actually the educational system. Yeah. So you can't even ask your teacher a question. And if you say you don't understand something, you're almost shunned for it or punished for it. So that educational pattern as well has reinforced what culture started. So you then have lots of children or lots of adults once they've graduated, or, you know, once they're of adult age, who just wait for instructions as opposed to try to use their initiative to solve problems. So you then have a society who finds it easy to just complain, but rather than fix and think. I'll use as an example, the times tables. If I've seen an average, maybe like 7-year-old here, and they can recite the 2 times tables, 2 times 2 is 4, 2 times 2 is 2, 2 times 2 is, you know, they can do all that. I just did not even get my 2 times tables right then. 2 times 2 is 4, 2 times 3 is 6. I know my times tables, guys. Okay, so we've gone from these kids can almost recite it as a song. Then I go to the UK and I speak to my equivalent, my 7-year-old nephew, and then he can actually break down that if I've got 4 sweets, I can give it to 2 different people. And that's why 2 times 2, 2 in 2 places is 4. Yeah. So in that qualitative way of addressing it into real life, he's already adapting it a lot quicker. But when I then ask the average 7-year-old here, and you have a bit more of a comprehension style, they tend to struggle a bit more because they can't adapt what they've learned into a real life situation. And that's that gap. That's where I think critical thinking lies. Is yes, you can think of something. You can almost like you can cram it, is what they say. You're taught. You learn to pass here as opposed to learn to understand. And until we get that, we reduce that gap, is where I think that's when critical thinking lies, in that gap, when you actually understand why you've learned something, as opposed to just learn it to pass, learn it to get to the next stage, learn it to. So you have a lot of, when I employ people, I actually, the process of my employment is, excuse me, is quite vigorous, or rigorous, I should say, because you might say I can proofread. I actually have to test that, because you can just copy and paste a CV. You might say, oh, I've got initiative. Okay, how do we test that you actually use your initiative? There was ages ago, about 7 years ago, I was in my 20s still, and I was hiring a personal assistant. And I actually had to put together my own process. I filmed the entire process of me employing staff, a personal assistant. And I remember I had one piece of paper, just a random piece of trash paper on the floor next to the bin. And I was interviewing the candidates, and I was thinking, who's actually got the initiative to say, you've got a bit of trash on the floor, do you mind if I put it in the bin? Or even if they just see it and they just fix it automatically without thinking. And out of 10 candidates, only 1 person saw that was a problem, identified the problem, and also the solution. Other people did not even notice it. And when I went back and I asked them, they said, we noticed that the piece of paper was on the floor, but we didn't think that we were in the position to fix the problem. Because they felt like if they were to point out the problem to me, I might see it as disrespectful. So that's the culture part of it, where even though you've noticed something, it's better to leave it alone because the other person might, so it's a fine line, and between the traditional aspect of critical thinking, as well, or promotion of initiative, I should say, really, as well as the education system, and how, I don't know if you want to say if it's failed, that might be a bit strong, but I do think it has failed the average Nigerian, because not those who can afford private schools and they're paying for school fees, the public schools. I do think that there's a big gap that needs to be addressed.
You know what? Probably that's like a very strong point. So I don't know the Nigerian school system enough to have an opinion about that. However, I'm just thinking about, so I've lived in 3 countries. I'm born and raised German. I've lived in France for 14 years, and now in the UK. I think that the critical thinking is probably a little bit more pushed in those geographies than what you described from Nigeria. However, what I realize is that most children or adolescents are actually not pushed into that corner of, okay, you have some theoretical knowledge, but how do you apply it to real life?
Yeah.
And what does that actually mean? And this is such an important point when you want to be a successful entrepreneur, because what you bring to the table is actually something that nobody has done before. So you need to get out of the beaten path to be able to provide to the market something that nobody has done before. Or if you go on a beaten path, at least you need to have a USP that is not the same as everybody else. So yeah, I think that's such an important point. And as soon as people get out of that beaten path, and probably also out of like a typical educational path, it really starts to be interesting, right? Because then it's when you really develop solutions to problems.
Absolutely.
There's something else that we also talked about, which is kind of going into the same direction of critical thinking, which is also having options.
Oh yeah.
And we talked about this more specifically when it comes to education of women.
Yes.
Because even in Germany, I mean, like there are typical male professions like engineer and all that, you know, and Germany being a country where educated workforce is constantly lacking. So, you know, every person, may not be a girl or boy, that is not going to have an education that is equivalent to a sector where workforce is lacking is a problem, actually. And I think that even in Germany today, or that I've seen that in France too, it's like there are certain professions that are considered as male, and ladies are like, girls are like thinking about, you know, going into the direction, or even thinking how that could be interesting. So STEM is typically one of them. Finance is another one. I know that from my personal experience, because women are always told money is not for you, and you can't handle money, and you can't deal with money, and you don't know what to do with it, etc., etc. I've heard that myself, actually.
Yeah.
And yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say I've also had experiences where I've been put in a box and said, well, you look a certain way, you've got an accent, you might be great on camera or TV, so why don't you just, you know, be a model or be an actress or be a presenter? And I was like, really? You think I went to university to get a first-class degree to just do something that's not in my field? No, come on. Don't belittle me. It's a bit reductionist, to be honest. However, back to the education and the diversity, it's because, well, I won't say it's because my experience is a lot of the young women don't see themselves represented enough in the STEM system. For example, if you're going to do, I don't know, computer engineering, a few years ago, maybe not so, I'm hoping the pattern or the trend is reducing, but majority, if you go to a class of, let's say, 50 students or 40 students, the teacher is male. 39 of the students are men. So you're going to be the one woman. You're going to stick her like a sore thumb. We live in Nigeria, there are high rates of harassment, child abuse. These things are still prevalent. So in a society where you're already on alert for these things, you don't necessarily want to put yourself in a situation where you then feel intimidated because you're physically surrounded, you're overpowered by testosterone. So you want to be in an environment where you're represented. There's another woman there. There are people who are like-minded, where you can see yourself. And that's why, you know, the chicken and the egg, you can't really get women to participate more until more women are participating in it. So how do we then do that? There was an interesting study, I believe, by World Bank in collaboration with Upwork. And they did a study in the northern parts of Nigeria, in Kano, I believe. And they went and they got, I think it was like an accelerator hub they put together. And they made sure that it was females, women that were teaching. They got even the bus driver, who was also a woman, I believe, to go and pick up all the students who were also women. And, you know, it's also, it's northern Nigeria, so there's also, it's Islamic as well. So they have to be very, very considerate and sensitive to the religion and the laws there. So once they actually got a majority female accelerator hub, we found that the women were actually very receptive. They learned a lot, and this is what the study showed. They learned, I think about something like 70% of them were able to learn a skill that was going to provide them income on Upwork. So whether it's UI, UX design or copyright, whatever it was, they learned to skill, a digital skill, and they uploaded their own profile on Upwork, because the study was in collaboration with Upwork. And even post-study, they were actually then able to contribute to the monthly income of the household, but from just having a device, which they always had anyway. They had a laptop, they had a mobile phone, but they were not earning any money through that. And now these young women who did not have access to that market or access to that skill, by being upskilled, by being upskilled, they automatically were given this opportunity to earn more money. So that study I found to be very, very powerful and impactful indeed. And it's very important that, yes, we have to look at, there's a problem, that's a misogynistic society. Okay, but we can't just sit back and say, that's it. There's nothing we can do about that. We still have to then think outside the box and think, okay, let's have a women-only accelerator program. Let's have a women-only digital training course for a school. Let's have a women-only, because like I mentioned, if 95% of the world's wealth is already run by men, we're already at a massive disadvantage. So we have to focus on things that are specifically pro-women.
Absolutely. And I also think there is an important thing that you said about the trailblazing, like, I think we have a duty, and I even consider that as women who are farther down the line in their career path than the two of us, is we have a moral duty to pass it on and to, expand the whole thing. I think that giving the example is one of the most powerful things. Like, despite the fact to have access to education and the market, aka digital devices, which often comes together, especially in Africa, there is the practical part that's absolutely necessary. But despite that, these young girls or young women will not do it if they don't have like a role model that they can follow. And I think that's like, almost like a moral duty. Women who are farther down the line in their career path, to foster that kind of development.
Absolutely.
I can see I can see that with my team. So we're an entirely female team, right? Which is actually not on purpose. So we don't do positive discrimination, but it happens so that we're an entirely female team. And I see this with the ladies in my team that are probably a bit less experienced in what we're doing, or the younger. It's so important to put them on the forefront, to empower them, to delegate important tasks to them, because I perfectly know that when I do this, they are going to take it on, and they're going to take it so serious. So, go on LinkedIn, talk. I always encourage them, like, go on LinkedIn, talk about yourself, tell them what you're doing, because you're great,
Absolutely. It's important to do so. Yeah, I have majority women on my team as well. There's about 13, outside of the tech team, who we've outsourced currently. In-house, there's about 13 of us, and there's three guys. So they're heavily outnumbered. Yeah, they're heavily outnumbered. So yeah, I do love supporting young women, and just women in general, even just my friends. There's so many small business owners. I'm just like, okay, what do? You sell hair, you've got hair creams, you've got perfumes, you've got whatever it is that you do. I would rather, I always try to make a conscious effort to support a woman first. Yeah, it's been interesting, because as a woman facing the barriers that I've faced coming up in Nigeria as an entrepreneur, and pivoting from media to tech, it was almost, I was underestimated, but I use that as a tool. I use that as a propeller, because I then thought, it's actually great. I can actually go completely under the radar. Everyone can completely underestimate me until I'm ready to launch what I want to launch. And then I don't have any, there's no barriers, there's less friction, there's less, So I always say that to people. So what if people think you can't do it? Like, everybody's told me I couldn't do this, that, and the other, but excuse me, also, they don't know my background. They don't know, that I've worked for a tech company like Google. They don't necessarily know that, they don't know much. So it's easy for people to assume and they want to then see themselves and say, if I'm not able to do this, then there's no way she should be able to do it too. And I love proving people wrong. I just always stay focused. Yeah, I'm a little bit resilient, stubborn, but yeah, in a good way.
That's what it makes. That way.
Yes,
absolutely.
And
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I wanted to actually, I just remembered something. A few months ago, earlier on this year, I was actually on another Zoom. I'm a board member of the Cherie Blair Foundation, and we were actually on a Zoom call. And there was a very popular telco company on the line as well. And they were then talking about, because the Cherie Blair Foundation also did a study which recently came out, and they interviewed a lot of women in developing countries and to see how Corona have affected their businesses. And just a lot of things like we mentioned, where we've had experiences where people say women are not good with money, you should just be a mother, you should just be a housewife, you should just to have menial jobs, you don't necessarily need to be in control of the finances. So there was a study that they did that pretty much proved, well, literally about 70, I think it was an average about 70% of women had faced this. But I digress. The actual Zoom call, the telco, there was a woman who was representative of the telco, and she had then said, yes, that they've actually just hired their second female CTO of the telco for Africa. And I then stopped everyone on the Zoom call and I said, that's amazing, but does anybody know her name? Without you telling this to us, does anybody know her name? And everybody was like, no. And I was like, exactly, that's the problem. You can't have like one of the biggest telcos in the whole of Africa this is the second time they've had a female CTO. Nobody's even known that they've had a female CTO in the first instance. Nobody knows this is the second time. These names should become household names. And that's how you get the average young woman to then see themselves represented. But the women who are making moves, unfortunately, they've also been told that, just do the work. You don't necessarily need the media. You don't need, and they kind of shun away from media because they think, oh, it's counterintuitive to, but it's it's a role that's beyond them, I believe. And I do think that they should.
I've seen this so many times, and I think that's the equivalent of what happens in private lives for successful women. It's like, yeah, we want you to be successful, but not too much, actually.
Yeah.
And
don't tell everyone about it.
Yeah. And it's like, when you're like an emancipated, financially independent woman, like a lot of men say, oh yeah, that's so attractive. But like, are you really ready to be in a relationship with that kind of woman? It's like, it's always the same thing. Like society says, we want great women in high positions, etc. But then you're like, are you really ready to accommodate this?
Exactly.
So,
yeah, it's always a balancing act. Yeah.
So definitely. We still have quite a path ahead. Well, Fadé, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Change. I really, really appreciate it. Let's do that again every once in a while.
Absolutely. And I will definitely be in touch. And I love the fact that you're connecting with female entrepreneurs from all over the world, shedding a spotlight on our story, on our experiences, any feedback, any advice that we can give. It's very useful, and I can't wait to share this with my community as well. And hopefully they've seen two women come together globally. Yes. Where are you right now?
So right now I'm actually in Paris.
Okay. Well, I'm in Lagos. So yeah, that we can connect with each other and support one another. Absolutely. I think that in itself is a beautiful story. It's a beautiful thing that you're doing. So I appreciate being invited to speak with you.
And I appreciate your time. I love these kind of conversations, and I absolutely love your enthusiasm.
Thank you. And download Bookings Africa.
Yes, download Bookings. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.